Good morning. I'm going to keep this really short and sweet. And this isn't your typical Sinew backing video because I'm going about it in a different way. Now, I was in, I don't know if you could call it a discussion, but a few, questions, answers, back and forth, conjectures regarding preparing fish bladder glue by chewing and then spitting into a container. I'm going to spare you the sight of me spitting incessantly into a container. So this is going to be a little thought video here. White cedar paddle bow, bent tab tips, and I never put the finishing wraps on anything, the wraps that like hold things down, until the sinew layer has shrunk down and it's relatively dried, not cured yet, but dry enough so that the back shrinking is not going to affect the wraps. In this case, because these are bent tabs and I've got that sharp curve right there, temporary wraps. So sinew back it, put some sinew around them to keep it from pulling up on the inside curve, that inside corner. A note on the bent tab tips. Some people may be intimidated by making a fish mouth joint, a V notch in here with just enough wood to let it tip up. Well, the strength lies in the sinew that goes up and over it and not in that joint itself. So you could actually do a pretty crummy job of joinery. You could probably accidentally cut the tip off or break it off during the process, sand it at an angle and then just glue it on. Doesn't really matter because the strength is not only in that sinew layer going over and under, it's also a factor in that the string is not pushing on the tip. It's pushing at the joint, and so the limbs themselves, not that tab that clips up, bearing the brunt of the tension, the pressure. So don't be afraid of like making these bent tab tips. You can't really mess it up. Okay. Now fish bladder glue, chewing, spitting, kind of thin glue. I wondered, and so I'm experimenting here, simulated. This is not a spitty mixture of glue that the rest of my sinew is floating in. It's just a thin hide glue mixture, thin enough so it doesn't congeal at room temperature. I was wondering, as far as backing, or preparing the back, would it work to have a lump of almost dried, very, very stiff, congealed glue, and then rub it on the back, and then rub it on the back, and you can thank me later for not seeing this process. And then the sinew wet, which may have happened thousands of years ago before hot plates and steel pans and such. How did they do that? Well, this is a thin gluey layer mixture, which I can picture would be actually roughly the same viscosity of chew and spit glue. Yeah. And I wanted to see if this would work with a sizing that was penciled on and then just wet sinew in a very, very loose glue mixture. And so far, as long as you're careful, because I had a lot of fibers laying in here side by side by side, as long as you're careful pulling them out and not turning the whole thing into a rat's nest, it's actually a very effective way to do it. This stuff is down. It's wetter than if it was my typical mix. Hide glue in the double boiler, which it's a misnomer, it's not boiling, it's just hot. All my little dry bundles sitting here that I dip and then put on here. This is actually it's a fun way to do it. Very wet. I'm putting them on one strand at a time here, but I didn't do that on the entire bow. I'm just kind of playing around. I've got a little bit left, and so I'm just kind of fixing it. In my estimation, as far as having like a smooth layer, I'm gonna put 2 fibers on here, with no deep ridges or cracks. This gives you a lot of control as far as getting the back smooth and not having like big fissures and stuff. Actually, more control. There's a little bitty one. Why not? I'll just put it over that gap. Gives me as much or more control as my normal method. It just takes a little longer, but it's easy. It's a very easy way in this thinned hide glue mixture. Just pulling them out and sticking them. And again, I'm almost done here, so I'm not doing anything more than just kind of playing around. I want to use them up because I don't want to have wet animal parts just soaking in the refrigerator for a month because they'll get stinky. This leads me to another point. Now, I have read that the natives would wrap the bows tightly with cherry bark to squeeze out the excess glue, and this was always a mystery to me because our modern method of using the thickish hide glue and double boiler, and dried sinew. I'm a wrapper. I am constantly wrapping bows, you know, to cinch things down. I have never seen excess glue squish out. It's a thick mixture, congeals fast. However, this is wet. It's not congealing, it's sticking nicely, it's not congealing. If I was to wrap this with cherry bark, I can totally envision that excess watery glue would squeak out, and it would also help compress these to help, in effect, with this method of using a very thin mixture of glue, which could have been, if I was ambitious, I could have just chewed up fish bladders and spit them in this Pyrex and have been working with the same viscosity. Does the fact that they used to use cherry bark to squeeze out the extra glue and water prove that a lot of native technology, and maybe going back into the time thousands of years ago, prove that this is how they did it? Hey, cat, get out there. No cat was harmed in the saving of my tripod there. Probably, it kind of proves, I don't know, proves in a loose way, not in like a flat earth proof kind of way, that maybe they went about it not with dried sinews, but stripped them when they were wet, threw them into like a little pot or a little container, a little birch bark macaque of a thinned, spitty glue mixture, and went about it this way, not the way we do now. So this is a little touch with the past. If you're wondering why I didn't show you the sinew banking up to here, I apologize. I kept going off on rants, and I don't want to blend metaphors here, primitive bows, and talking about how I'm not going to go off on again. But hopefully there's some thoughts here that will stick with you. A very thin glue mixture using wet sinew fibers. It doesn't congeal at room temperature. Doing the back, preparing it with a glob of very hard glue mixture, and then rubbing it on the back. As far as I can tell, this thing works. And do I believe that this is the way they did it more than our modern method of having dried bundles in a double boiler? I think this is it, because I don't have to have a heat source. Very low tech. The glue can be a lot thinner, which in an old way of doing things, 1,000 years ago or whatever, they probably did use combination of dried balls for sizing or harder balls for sizing, and then a thinny glue mixture with just wet fibers in here to stick on the back. It worked really well. I'm going to wrap it. Gauze is down in the nature center, not up here. And I bet I'm going to see a liquid oozing through the gauze, which will be a great sight for me, because that goes along with what I've read. Wrapping with cherry bark, squish it down, and then ooze the excess liquid out. Might have rediscovered a little bit of our history here. Always exciting. Have a great day, and thank you for watching. Oh, one last thought. Am I going to pour the remainder of my gluey mixture out? Certainly not. I'm just going to set it, maybe in the oven at 200 degrees or lower, and just let it dry out, and it's going to peel up into a beautiful amber sheet, which can be reconstituted, broken apart, chewed on, and can go for backing another bowl. because the theory of cave people is you don't throw out good materials. With that, I'm going to say goodbye and open the gates. It's time.